Hi, my name is Kaze and welcome to another Right Brain tutorial, and this is the third and final part of this series on UDIMs. I want to apologize to you guys that it took me a little bit longer to get this third part finished, but I did have another project that I am working on, and we actually ended up shooting some footage against green screen that then I'm going to incorporate into this kind of big CG scene, and hopefully I'm going to learn a bunch of stuff from that process that I can kind of then turn around and make some new tutorials. That's for the future. Right now, let's go back into the world of UDIMs. So in the previous tutorials, we created the UDIM tiles and our set, and we then prepared everything to send into Substance Painter, and then we brought everything into Substance Painter, and we did our little texturing job, a bit of a rushed job at that, but nonetheless, you know, like enough to kind of give you an idea of what is going on. So now we're going to go back to the Houdini and bring these textures that we created into Houdini and render and see a little bit what happens. So let's dive into Houdini and find out. Alright, so here we are in Houdini, and we're going to start with the canister, this kind of sci-fi little canister of sorts that we've been using as the first example. And let's build a texture and let's import this UDIM maps and see a little bit what goes on. So we're just going to go into 3D Light, and we're going to have the 3D Light material builder. And once again, I want to state that this process is very, very similar to the way you would do it in Mantra, and it's the same as you would do it in Redshift. So the only thing that changes is like what some of the nodes are called, but basically everything else is pretty much the same. So let's call this canister underscore U for UDIM, and we're going to dive right in here, and we have this terminal, and we're going to create a principal shader. Once again, this is for 3D Lights, but the workflow is very, very similar. In Redshift, you would just create a material node, and in Mantra, you would use a principal shader as well, except you don't really need this terminal right here. So what we want to do now is we want to bring in the UDIM sets that we created in Substance Painter, and as I said, these UDIM sets are a set of textures, in this particular case EXR files, and they each have a number. So let's do that. I'm going to create a texture node right here, and once again, in Redshift, you would do exactly the same thing. I'm just going to pump the color into our color input, and I'm just going to call this base, okay, because this is just our base material. So under my Houdini preferences, I have as file chooser my native chooser because, as I said, I really like the OS X kind of workflow, and I'm used to it. However, in this particular case, with UDIM tiles, there is actually a neat little shortcut that allows us to find UDIM and bring them in as correct sets of UDIMs automatically without needing to do anything. And that, however, requires that we go back to the Houdini chooser. So I'm going to change my preference in here and say that I want the Houdini chooser. I'm going to say accept, and I'm going to go back to my texture, click here on the texture file. So in this particular case, I know that my textures live in this folder called canister underscore U underscore textures. That's where I saved them. So I'm going to double click on this. And what I want to do here, there's this little drop-down menu that you can see that right now says frame range, okay? And this is handy if you're bringing in a frame sequence, like you know, some animated textures or like some video or something like that that have been kind of split into EXRs or PNGs or something like that. However, if we click on the drop-down, okay, we see that we have two other options, and one of them says UDIM, okay? So this is really, really cool. We're gonna select UDIM. This is gonna save us some time because Houdini is gonna create the proper naming convention so that our texture node is going to recognize these as proper UDIM texture sets. So let's start with the base color. I'm just going to point to this guy, and I'm just going to click accept, okay? And if we navigate here, let me expand this a little bit. You can see a little bit what Houdini did for us. So basically, even though our texture file names are canister underscore U underscore base color dot 1001, 1002, 1003, and so on, it has replaced that number with this little triangle bracket. I'm not really sure what they're called actually, now that I think about it. I guess like greater than and less than symbols. And then the word UDIM, okay? .exr. So what this does in this particular file naming convention is that it allows our texture nodes to automatically understand that what they're reading here is not just a single texture file, okay, not a single 4K EXR file, but actually part of a set. And in this particular case, they should look at all the numbering that would normally come here, where we have this word UDIM instead, and basically import those files as one set. So no matter how large that texture set is, in this particular case I have 4 UDIM tiles, it understands that this is a single UDIM set. So this is very important, and this is exactly the way it works in Mantra, and this is exactly the way it works in Redshift as well, okay? So now let's hit render, and hopefully our texture that we created in Substance Painter is gonna appear, and it does. So this is a really, really good sign. So let's do the same for the rest of the textures. So I'm just gonna right click and let's call this roughness, okay? And we're gonna do the same thing, and we're gonna navigate to, once again, we have our little UDIM drop down right here, and I'm just gonna say roughness, click accept, and once again it brought in roughness, but instead of the numbers it just replaced it with this UDIM word. So same thing here, I'm just gonna go and create, point it to the metallic thing. It already knows that it's part of a UDIM set, and I'm just gonna click accept. Option drag, alt drag for you Windows users, normal, map, and actually this one I'm gonna do without the little Houdini shortcut. So let's say that we didn't have this set up for UDIM, and we just had it set just for UV tile right now, okay? So basically in the in the Apple Finder and the macOS Finder, as well as the Houdini Finder, I would see the individual files like this, okay? So we have 4 for the base color, 4 for the high channel, 4 for the metallic, 4 for the normal, and 4 for the roughness. So let me just kind of bring in the normal one, okay? And I'm just going to click on this first one, which is canister underscore U normal and .1001. I'm just going to click accept. And we will see here that what happened here is that it brought in this file path, but right now we have the number, okay? We don't have the actual UDIM word. So right now Houdini does not know that this is actually part of a UDIM set. It just thinks that this is just a single texture. So what we need to do, we can do this change manually. So we'll just kind of erase where the number is, and I'm just gonna hit shift and put like this greater than. I'm just gonna type UDIM and then close this bracket, and now Houdini and 3D Light and the texture node are going to recognize that this is part of a UDIM set, and it's going to sort out all the numbering for you. Now we should have our full object in its full glory. We can kind of see that we have like the nice metallic where it's supposed to be, and we have you know, some you know, we have roughness, we have you know, like our normals mapped, which are probably not very visible in this particular type of texture, but anyway, here we are with our second UDIM example where we have this interceptor type of spaceship, okay? And the problem that we were trying to solve in the first example was simply to have increased resolution on our model so that we could get a lot of detail, especially when being close up to our object. In this particular case, we have a different problem that UDIM is going to help us solve, which is that normally the way I would have tackled this type of geometry is I would have created a bunch of different materials for each little piece part, and this would have in turn created a whole bunch of you know, material builder nodes in my material context, and it would have made this particular scene a little bit more difficult to transport, say if I wanted to bring it into Blender, because now I have to create a whole bunch of materials in Blender that now have to be rematched to all the different pieces, parts that I have on this particular spaceship. So what we're trying to do with UDIMs is basically simplify the process so that we can have a single material that covers the entire surface of our geometry, but at the same time that has, one, the resolution, and two, that has all these different materials applied to all the different pieces, parts of our object. So let's do the same thing that we did with the canister. So we're going to go into our material context. I'm just going to click and create a material builder. I'm going to call this interceptor _u. I'm going to dive right into it, and once again we're going to create a principled material. And once again, as I said, like, this is very, very similar to the way you would do it in Redshift or Arnold or Mantra or so on and so forth. So I'm going to create a texture file, and I'm going to put this under the color input. I'm going to call this base material. So now I'm going to hit P to get my little parameter window, and I'm just going to click on this guy, and once again I'm going to navigate to this folder that's called interceptor _u textures. This were generated from Substance Painter based on what we did in the previous video. So the first thing I want to do is, once again, with this guy set to UDIM to save me a little bit of typing once I bring the file in, I'm just going to select the first base color, and I'm just going to click accept and see what we can see. And what we can see is pure white. The reason why is because I always forget this, always. I forgot to assign my material, so now there's no material assigned. So let's get this out of the way and let's assign my material. I'm just going to go in the render tab here, and I'm just going to say interceptor U. That's the material that we want to use. I'm going to hit render once more, and now with a little bit of luck we should actually have our proper texture set of at least for the base color that we had in Substance Painter. Go in here and look for the roughness. Here it is. I'm just going to click accept. Well, in the previous example we used the normal map. In this example let's use the height or displacement map. So I'm just going to call it height. This is already pre-configured for us, and I'm going to click on the bump to expose our input. I'm just going to put the color into the bump value, and then we want to click on the principled and change this from bump map, not to normal map, but displacement. And in this particular case I'm going to do a displacement 0, 0 centered, because I have discovered that Substance Painter actually exports displacement as 0.0 centered as opposed to the other option, which is 0.5 centered. So if you bring in displacement and all of a sudden it looks funky, that's probably why, especially if you're using 3D Light. But as I said, I forget if like Redshift has a similar type of setting, but you might want to double check on that. So it appears that we have everything that came in. Like if we look at the one with just the base material, you can see that there's no metal shininess here, and there's no roughness, and now we have some nice roughness. We also have, I don't know if you can really see here, but like on our wing particularly, we have some displacement map. So let's talk about our glass, okay? So we went out of our way to create an opacity map in Substance Painter so that we could have a transparent glass, because right now our glass is not transparent because we don't have an opacity map that is helping 3D Light determine what should be seen through and what isn't. So let's fix that. Click on this guy. So this is the opacity map. And in this particular case, we do have an opacity input for 3D Light. And this is where we're going to want to pump this particular texture into. So I'm just going to hit render once more. And if this works, we should be able to now start to see through our glass. And yeah. So having said that, what would we need to do if we didn't have an opacity map? So let's say that maybe we were in a situation where we did all of our texturing in Substance Painter, and then we forgot to export an opacity map. And this is where I kind of want to show you cool little trick that you can do in case that you need to do certain things to certain parts of your objects but not others, even though they are part of a single UDIM set, okay? Because you can kind of separate those two, believe it or not. And UDIMs is actually more flexible than originally I thought was going to be. So here, if you recall from the first video, we have separated our main fuselage, our hardware pieces parts, our glass, and our bombs, okay? And then what we're doing is we're merging them back all together and basically kind of sending them out through this null, which then gets assigned to this single material, this interceptor _u for the UDIMs. But what if we didn't want to send everything there? What if we wanted to maybe separate some pieces parts? So in this particular case, we realized that our canopy is not transparent, we don't have an opacity map. How do we do that while still retaining our UDIM set? Because we don't want to lose that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to disconnect our glass here from our merge node. So now we have everything except for our glass. And what I'm going to do here, I'm actually going to put like some normals just to be on the safe side. Hello, normal. And then I'm going to put like a null. And in this null, I'm going to call this out glass, okay? So what we have right now is everything minus the glass, and then we have this guy that's got just the glass pieces parts, okay? So we're gonna do something with this in just a second. So let's go back to our OBJ level, and I'm gonna make myself a little bit of room. I'm gonna create another geometry node, okay? And we're gonna call this glass. And I'm going to go in here and I'm going to use an object merge to bring in the glass into our scene. So I'm just going to click on this guy. I'm going to point it to our out glass. Okay, I'm going to click accept, and now we have the glass right here. Cool. So now basically this is what our interceptor geometry is giving us, which is everything minus the glass, and then I click on this visibility and now we have the glass again. Okay. So let's go back into our interceptor U, and I'm just going to alt drag and make this, and I'm going to call this interceptor glass. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back here and I'm going to now assign the material interceptor glass because I don't want it to be the full UDIM set. I just want to separate this particular piece, even though it's part of the UDIM set, and I want to use it just for the glass. So now what I can do is I can go into my material, and let's cut off all of our connections to the UDIMs. Instead of a principled material, I'm going to get rid of this guy, and I'm going to have 3D Light actually has a nice glass material. Okay, so I'm going to click on this guy. I'm going to pump the color out to the surface. In Redshift, by the way, you can still use your regular main material node. You just have like a drop-down menu that allows you to select what you want your material to be, and you have selections for different metals, and you have selection for plastic and like liquids, and one of them I think is glass, so you can kind of just switch that. So I'm going to use this particular glass, and I'm just going to hit render. So far so good. This is cool. This is giving us glass while allowing us to retain the rest of the UDIM material. So it's kind of nice to know that even if you remove some of your UDIM tiles from the set, the rest of the UDIM tiles are correctly mapped onto your geometry. So this is really important because it's going to give us a lot of flexibility to fine-tune things after Substance Painter, okay, after the fact. So, however, one of the things that I did like from the previous render is that I had like this nice little kind of roughness maps, this kind of dirt, grungy sort of material mapped to my glass. How can we use our glass, but at the same time still have access to our roughness that we liked so much on our UDIM set? What I can do is I can still bring in the roughness map. And in this particular case, we do have a input for reflection roughness, and we even have a refraction roughness if we want to be very thorough. So I'm just going to pump it into both. Okay, so here we are with the rendered image. I actually put like a red light inside of our cockpit just so that we could see a little bit better what's going on with our glass. And if you look closely, we now have our roughness map from our UDIM tile set mapped onto this new glass material that we created just for the windows. So the point here is simply that even after you create your UDIM sets, and even after you go into Substance Painter and create your textures and so on and so forth, even when you're back into Houdini, by basically splitting some of this geometry and using the object merge to assign it to its own material, we can still have some flexibility while still retaining the ability of tapping into our UDIM tile set. And of course, we're not limited to just the roughness. As a matter of fact, what I did here is, well, for the windows, I added a remap node, which is the equivalent of a ramp node in Redshift, because I thought, well, like this glass is looking a little too opaque, a little too rough, and I wanted it to be more transparent, and right now maybe it's probably a little too transparent, but the point is that we can adjust to taste all of these different elements. If we put a remap node on our original UDIM tile, then we would be adjusting the roughness of our entire model, but right now we're just adjusting it on the glass. But we can also do other things, like for instance, let's say that you wanted to, I don't know, maybe add some additional weird displacement on the wings. We could isolate the wings through the object merge, as I showed you, and just add an additional displacement map on this material while also retaining our base texture and our roughness, our metallic, and all this other stuff from our UDIM set. Or I don't know, maybe we wanted to add like some emission to these bombs or something like that. We could do that as well. All right. I hope you enjoyed watching this 3-video series on UDIMs. Hopefully they've given you some new ideas, and hopefully it's made UDIMs a little less scary than it was before. As you can see, UDIMs can be really powerful, really flexible, and most importantly, it can streamline the workflow quite a lot. If you like this tutorial or tutorial series, please click like below, subscribe, tell your friends, all the cool stuff. And I have some cool new things coming up in future tutorials, especially based on this brand new project that I just started working on, and I'm looking forward to share all of these cool new techniques and things that I'm learning about as I'm doing it. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.